Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Resistance podcast. Today we've got Matt Tissier. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
I was a former Premier League footballer with Southampton Football Club, played a few times for England, and then had a 18-year media career after I finished playing football. So that was me.
And do you want to tell people where we are?
We are at the Sounds Beautiful Festival just outside Wimborne, down in Poole, and the sun is just breaking out for us as well. What perfect timing.
Oh, fortuitous.
The sun always shines on the righteous, you see.
Well, you did play for the Saints, didn't
Exactly.
So what's drawn you down to this festival today then?
To be honest, I think I love connecting with like-minded people, people who are aware of what's going on in the world at the moment, and it's nice to be around people who kind of think the same things as you, don't think you're mad for thinking those things, can have a sensible conversation, respectful, and they're just wonderful people.
And you spent quite a long time in football, and then you were commentating in football. You came into football, was it just as football was being first televised, so when it had that boom period?
Yeah, so it was kind of before the boom period, really. So I started, my first game was in 1986, and then the Premier League was when it all kind of really took off, and that was 1992. So I had 6 years of playing in the old First Division before it all changed a little bit, and there were more live televised games going on. So yeah, I saw the best of both worlds, or the worst of both worlds, whichever way you want to look at it.
So you remember what it was like as sort of the working class man's game,
Absolutely.
Where everyone came from, usually people come from their local area.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely saw that and saw how it kind of progressed into almost like a corporate environment for quite a bit of the stadium. But I think at the moment football's kind of just getting out of hand with the cost of it, if you ask me.
Do you think it's lost its identity?
A little bit, yeah. I do think. I think the money has got to a point where I think fans are kind of a little bit turned off by it, because it's just astronomical amounts of money for kind of running around on a football pitch and sometimes not actually being that good a footballer, and yet you're there earning £100,000 a week. Something doesn't seem to sit quite right with a lot of fans with that.
So I've never been someone who's been massively into football. And ever since they started taking the knee, I was apathetic before. Once they started doing that, I became sort of adversarial to the league. So yeah. I don't mind people playing football, but I think the way that it works.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the politics that are involved in it all now has ruined it for quite a lot of people, quite frankly. And the problem we've got is that politicians aren't good enough to engage people in politics, so they have to hijack something else to get their agendas across, and they've done that with football, done that with a lot of sports, and all because we have the wrong kind of people in charge at exactly the wrong time in our history, and so it's a big problem. I'm like you, it really turned me off seeing people taking the knee. It was just divisive, not necessary, and so yeah, I think I, along with many people, didn't really tune into the games until they'd been kicked off for a few minutes.
What do you think there is to support these days? Because back in the day, it used to be your local lads from your local town playing in your local team.
Yeah.
And the clubs really used to vary. They could go up, they could go down.
Yeah.
Often the owners were big businessmen, but from the town.
From the town.
People
Absolutely.
who'd made it good.
Yeah, it's a shame the way it's gone. It's become such a big business that it's, they're billionaires' play toys now, as opposed to being community hubs, being run by people with good intentions who are, as you say, local businessmen who've just done well for themselves, run the football club in a responsible way, don't get it into financial trouble so that there's any chance of it going out of business. And I think it just became so popular that it's been again hijacked by people with lots of money and big egos.
Because it used to be essentially an exercise in localism, which I like.
Me
when
too.
you've got your community
Me too.
and you're out there, you're cheering not just for this businessman who owns it or for a logo or just the fact it's got your town's name, but because it's essentially part of your town.
Yeah. And I think, going down the years through the 80s and 90s, there was a lot more affinity to clubs who had local players playing in their team. There was, and people that had come through the system. I wasn't a Southampton boy, but Southampton was, the team I started at 16 years of age. I came through that youth set up there, and the fans were always, really brilliant towards me. And we had several. Southampton were pretty famous for bringing through a lot of good young players into the first team, and that's what I think the fans really connected with.
Do you think it's become bread and circuses?
I do feel that sometimes, yeah, I do. I think the whole money thing has kind of made it uncompetitive, if that's a word. I think it is.
I think so.
I think so. I've just made it up if it hasn't. You can start a season now in the Premier League and you can just point to probably 3 teams that might win it. Whereas back in the 80s, you could probably point to maybe 7 or 8 that had a good season. There wasn't that real disparity between the teams at the top and the teams at the bottom.
Well, you used to have the ability to spend as much as you wanted, which, as the money came into it, you saw these clubs rise straight up to the top. Like Chelsea had a whole load of money pumped in.
Yeah.
But it was after Chelsea came up that they started putting on these spending limits, which were theoretically meant to stop.
Counterproductive.
They were meant to help everything. But it seems that they've now just entrenched 4 or 5 big clubs.
Absolutely.
And they are the big clubs, and forever they'll be the big clubs.
Exactly. Self-preservation. Self-preservation laws is what they were.
Where's Sheffield Wednesday and, all of the big clubs back in the day?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been, I think those laws need looking at and need changing, and it has become a bit of a club, and if you're not in it, you ain't getting in it.
So you were a commentator. You commented a lot on football, and people did love you. They loved your commentary, but they pushed you into the BLM thing.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I then kind of had a bit of an issue with Sky when they asked us to wear the Black Lives Matter badges after the whole George Floyd incident. Not really, no. So the first time we went back to work, and the producer gave us these badges just before we got about to go on air. And he made us put all these badges on. I looked at him, I went, do we have to wear that? And he went, it's in your best interest if you do. And I was like, oh, okay. So anyway, we did the show, and I felt really uncomfortable all afternoon. I was like, and I kept looking at it, I'm thinking, what the f*** am I doing wearing that? I don't agree with that shit. So at the end of the show, I took the badge and I said to the guy who had given us the badges, I said, I'm going to give you this back. I said, I'm telling you now, I would never wear that badge again on the show. If you want me to wear the Kick Racism Out badge, because I'm not racist, I treat everybody equally, and I've always tried to do that in my life. So if you want me to wear a different badge, I'm going to, but don't make me wear that, because I know what that organisation stands for, and I'm not in agreement with that. So I will not be wearing that badge again. So I was the first person at Sky who refused to wear the Black Lives Matter badge.
Did any others? Did any others follow you?
Eventually. There was like a slow drip of people, and then eventually nobody was wearing it. So so I think there was some justification there. It takes one person to stand up and give courage to the other people, and that's what I've tried to do over the last few years, because I think there's so many people who are in agreement with what I've been saying, and I've got lots of messages of support in private, through my mobile phone, through Twitter DMs. From people who are still in the public eye, who still have a job in the media, who agree with everything that I've said. But the last sentence is always, but I've got a mortgage to pay, and I can't risk losing my house, and losing my job. And I think somebody at the back there said spineless, didn't they? Saved me saying it.
People are very comfortably off, aren't
they?
But
I do kind of get it a little bit. But I would say to those people now, if they ever get to see this, I will say to them, you can make another life. There is another life outside of that media. There's other jobs that you can do. There's so many other things that are much more worthwhile in life that you can do. And if that means taking a drop in your living standards, so be it. I'm probably 50% down on what I was earning 4 years ago. But you know what? I'm probably way happier than I was 4 years ago.
And there's somebody said over there, I just heard you can sleep at night.
I can sleep at night, yes.
Although
my CBD gummies help me.
I think politics needs to keep the hell out of sport, quite frankly. And certainly the TV companies don't need to be getting involved in that kind of stuff. And I felt really uncomfortable being forced into kind of wearing it. So that's why I refused after that first time, and I didn't really have a huge amount of time to think about it. And when I'd given it time and thought, and I made that decision. So yeah, politics and sport should never, ever be mixing.
Do you see BLM as essentially a sort of, in a way, a neo-Nazi movement?
I mean, it's been described as many things. Certainly, some of the things that they stand for are completely the opposite of what I would want in a society. And so that's why I kind of refuse to wear that. I don't think they're a particularly great organisation. If their agenda was to unify people, they're going about it in a very, very strange manner. And we've seen what's happened with the leaders of the BLM, with the houses that they've been buying, with the funds that were raised. I think it's been shown to be, again, another psyop, corruption-filled organisation.
Because for quite a while, football was the great unifier. Because you did have...
But it's been hijacked.
Yeah, you did have a bit of
hijacked.
racism amongst people, and people used to often blame this on the working class. But then you got these players come in, different skin colours, and they'd be cheering for them.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time, obviously, when the black players first started coming in, they did come in for quite a bit of stick. But as we evolved, as each generation went on, I think it became less and less. But as it became less and less, the rare incidents that we were seeing were blown up into massive, massive incidences. And by the media coverage, you think that it was actually worse than what it was in the 70s. And it was nowhere near as bad. I think each generation that goes on now is less racist. If I look at my kids and the generations that have come, my 15-year-old daughter doesn't see colour at all. Nothing. And I hope she remains that way throughout her entire life. And I'm sure she will, and I'm sure she'll pass that on if ever she has children.
Well, that's what I sort of remember growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s. People didn't really care about skin colour. It was something that we'd sort of gone past as a society.
Yeah, I thought that. It's, I think it's been brought back as an agenda, and I think sometimes some of the incidents that are actually seen to be racist incidents, I think sometimes they're actually staged to actually keep people divided. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all breathe the same air, we're built up the same way, and we just get on with each other. It's pretty simple, really. I mean, it's not a difficult concept, but people just seem to be intent on wanting to find divide in every single possible thing they can.
Yeah, and also replace a lot of our culture, you might say. What do you think about the mass migration that's been going on?
I find it a bit bizarre that nothing is being done about it. I don't know how we can turn a blind eye to everything that's going on there. For me, the fact that they're doing nothing about it, and the fact that we're housing them in hotels where the government are offering hotel owners massive contracts to fire all their staff and allow their hotel to be used for these people at a cost of however million a day it is now, but it's ridiculous. I don't see how we can survive like that, and I don't see where all this money's going to. We've got a cost of living crisis where some people are struggling to put food on the table, and yet here we are spending billions every year on housing people that shouldn't be here.
Yeah. Are you worried that by importing a large amount of migrants that it's going to essentially create a population that's not as invested in this country and may not have been brought up with our traditions? For example, talking about our Magna Carta and our Bill of Rights, and the fact that we had our revolution back in 1215, whereas the French had theirs over 500 years later.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, we can only guess at the number of people that there is. We can only guess at the intentions. Nobody I've seen has given any real solid evidence of why they're here, why they're being allowed to be here, who is paying for them to come in. So until that, it's all open to subjecture, really. I don't know for certain what's going on there. But if the numbers that they're talking about continue to rise, then at some point, obviously, that's going to massively change the demographic of the country, and culture will change. Yeah, without shadow.
And where do you think it's going? What do you think is behind all of this?
What do I think is behind all of this? I think ultimately, I think it's a agenda to strip people of their culture in countries. And I think the ultimate aim, I feel like, is for there to be a one world government. That's where I feel like it's leading to. That's where the evidence is kind of pointing towards. I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope I'm wrong, and I hope there's not so much evil in this world. But what I've witnessed over the last 3 or 4 years, I'm a little bit sceptical about that at the moment.
And every time I saw Bill Gates on the telly, I thought, wrong 'un. There's something not right about that fella. And loads of people had said things to me about him, and I hadn't really bothered too much. And then I saw what was going on, and I was like, right, I've got a bit of time on my hands. Let's go and have a look. So I went into his website on his foundation, started having a look through all the people that he donates his money to, where his money was going.
He's very philanthropic, isn't
he just? Very generous man. I mean, hundreds of millions of pounds, media organisations. Why would he want to do that? I mean, talk about being so blatant and obvious. Clearly buying publicity, decent publicity, and then all the institutions that were involved in the COVID nonsense, all of them he was donating large amounts of money to as well. You know, so Johns Hopkins University, all the people involved in the statistics, and I was like, something's not right here. Something's not right. So I was like, okay. Then somebody mentioned to me about the UN Agenda 2030. So I went and had a look at that website, and that scared the shit out of me. When I saw the plans that they had for us drawn up over the next kind of decade or so, I was like, oh my God, how are there people in the world that want to have this much control over human beings? These are seriously evil psychopath people. And I was like, this is something seriously bad here. And then the clincher, I then came across a series called The Fall of the Cabal. If you could have seen my face when I was watching that series, oh my God, I was like, all the things that I've kind of thought were a bit dodgy in the past. Like, I knew politicians were corrupt, right? I knew there was corruption at the top end of governments. I knew that. But when I listened to that, I mean, I underestimated it quite grossly.
As we all do.
Oh,
as we all
my
did.
God. And that's the thing. If you tell a big enough lie, people will believe it because they go, oh, it's such a big lie, it must be true. The people at the top of this system are not very nice people, to put it bluntly. So I'll be careful what I say because I want to stay around on this planet for a little bit longer.
I don't think there's any snipers in the audience, I'm pretty sure.
So that was me then. I was like, oh my God, something's so bad. I've got to say something about this. I feel like I couldn't not say something. And so I started posting my sort of thoughts on social media, and that was interesting. I went from literally using my Twitter account for 11 years or something, basically just talking about sport for 11 years. And then I did a tweet in March of 2020, which completely changed my entire world. And I wrote, why are we making such a fuss about a virus that's only going to be potentially harmful to people who have already got comorbidities and are very old?
That's a fairly respectable question, isn't
well,
it?
I thought it was a fairly respectable question, but I then suffered the first bot swarm of my entire life. Oh my God, the responses I got to that were incredible. But strangely enough, at the same time, that tweet actually got the most likes I'd ever had in 12 years on social media.
There's an irony.
Wasn't it? It wasn't it just, I was getting all these people liking it, but in the comments, I was getting absolutely hammered by people, you know, and so I thought, well, I must have hit a nerve there. And I'm one of those people who won't get bullied. You know, I won't get shouted down. If I feel like something is right, I need to talk about it. And it doesn't matter how much abuse you give me, you're not going to make me go away. And luckily, I've got a thick skin from, you know, having 40,000 people every week singing rude songs about the size of your nose or the size of your ass. So I developed a pretty thick skin, and that stood me in good stead for the last 4 years, if I'm honest. I mean, that was, you know, that...
I want to fight for my kids to have a better future, to have a better world to live in, one that isn't divided, one where people can live in harmony with each other, one where the governments actually care about their people as opposed to caring about their handlers above them. That would be the ultimate aim. And to do that, we need to get as many people on board as possible, and that's why I speak out, in the hope that people might listen and you know, come to the same conclusions that I've come to.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I'm a tutor, and I know that you've mentioned before that you've been worried about some of the things that have been taught in schools to kids.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your personal experience as a father?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff my daughter's come back and told me that they've been taught at school, I found quite horrific, to be honest. And some of the stuff, the rules that they brought in with, the toilet facilities being shared and doors taken off the toilets. It's all
they took doors off the toilets.
So, yeah, in my daughter's school, they took the main door that leads into the toilet. They took the door off.
So you can just walk past the toilet and
everyone can see into there. Yeah, obviously there's cubicles in there where they go to the toilet, but that's by the by. That's a private room and shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. I don't know why they've done that. So luckily, I've kind of hoped that over the last 4 years, I've taught my daughter enough life lessons to know that some of that stuff that they're teaching in school, you don't need to be listening to. And I find myself just countering some of the stuff that she comes back and tell me, and she's pretty sensible and got a pretty level head, and she listens and takes it on board. So all good.
But you worried about her becoming the minority in future?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'd like to think that at the moment there's a pretty big majority of people that actually feel that common sense is actually the best way to go forward in this planet. But we appear to be being hijacked by people who want to set different agendas and push it onto people, and almost browbeat people into believing the ideologies that they want to give us.
And I know that you've been down at Hope, supporting Hope as well, with what we're doing.
Yep.
Getting kids out of the system, basically.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. Amazing place. Yeah, and I wish there was more of that stuff. If I'd have had one of those when my daughter first started going to school, that she would definitely have been at a Hope Sussex.
Well, maybe one day when you've got grandkids.
You never know. You never know.
It's a possibility.
Absolutely.
Would you encourage parents to
definitely
homeschool them?
Oh yeah, I encourage any parent to not let their child go to a state school and be indoctrinated the way that they have been. And
do you want to talk a little bit about what happens with you getting kicked out of the mainstream? Do you want to just fill people in who don't know the details?
I mean, I was quite outspoken against the mainstream media. I felt like their fear-mongering when COVID first started was off the charts and does nobody any good whatsoever. And all the medical people know that one of the worst things you can do for your immune system is to be in fear. Fear suppresses your immune system. It's no good for you, and yet they deliberately try to make everybody scared with their nonsense that they were coming out on the television with. And so it was all counterproductive. And as was spoken about before, a lot of the stuff that you actually see on the television, you've actually got to flip it 180 degrees and you'll be a lot closer to the truth.
What was it? What was the thing that woke you up?
I think people going a bit bonkers about the people falling down in the streets in China at the start of it all. Because I took one look at that video and went, well, that's a load of BS. And yet everyone was losing their mind. I was like, all the time growing up, I've always been taught, don't take any notice what comes out of China. It's just pure propaganda that comes out there. And all of a sudden this video came out and everyone's going, oh, this is true. This must be right. And I was like, no, mate. You don't fall over like that for a start. If you're gonna keel over, you're not putting your hands out to break your fall because you're not compos mentis. So that was the first thing, and then that would kind of set off a chain reaction of events, really.
So you've been going down the rabbit holes?
I went down a few rabbit holes. Yeah, I tended not to want to go too deep because I think there's some really nasty stuff out there, and I think you could probably beat yourself up over it if you go too deep. There's only so far that you can go, and there's so many different agendas. You can only take on so much information at a time, and so yeah, I didn't go really deep.
What have been the consequences for you of getting up, speaking out?
I lost my job at Sky Sports. I've been cancelled from a few speaking jobs over the last few years, but that's kind of, a bit of abuse on social media. That's par for the course. So that don't bother me at all. So yeah, that's kind of it, really. It's nothing I can't cope with.
And are you worried about some of your former colleagues and other footballers getting up and encouraging people to do this?
Encouraging people the way that I'm doing, or the opposite of what I'm doing?
Doing the opposite, encouraging people to,
I've not been a fan of Gareth Southgate and Jurgen Klopp and Alan Shearer going on the social media and encouraging kids to get jabbed. There was no need for them to be jabbed. Matt Hancock actually stood up in Parliament in, I think it was October of 2020 or 20 it might have been. And he said these jabs are adult jabs and they will not be used on children. He stood up in Parliament and said that, and he blatantly lied through his back teeth, and nobody bats an eyelid.
I was there covering the protests when they were first authorising it for the kids outside the. It was the building that sanctions all of it, and I just remember the fury of people because they've been lied to.
It's disgusting, absolutely. So those people have they've got to live with the consequences of their actions, and they'll pay for that one day. I truly believe that.
Do you think there's cosmic justice?
Yeah, 100%.
What
you
gives
reap
you
what
that,
you sow.
What gives you that conviction?
I've always believed that you reap what you sow. I think there's karma in this universe, and I think at some point, it might not be today, might not be tomorrow, but at some point in your life, if you've done bad enough stuff, you will pay for it.
And do you ever think about how many lives you might have saved by being a voice, speaking out?
Not really. That wasn't I guess it was a little bit to do with the point. It was just I think my main objective was to give a bit of balance to what we were seeing on the television, because there's always two sides to every story, and I think people should be able to hear both sides of that story and be able to make their own minds up and not just be pummeled incessantly by one side of the argument. And that was the thing that really got my back up in 2020.
So I take it you don't pay your BBC licence?
No, I do not. No, I'm on about my 27th letter at the moment. They all go in the bin, and not a single visit in 4 years. So, I don't really care about that.
Well, what I've been doing is they say you can contact them on a certain website or something and inform them. But I just want them to keep sending me letters.
Yeah, I just want to be annoying to them.
Every letter they send is taking money away from the BBC. With
Absolutely.
So I want them to send people out for visits. I want more letters because I'm slowly draining them of resources.
Absolutely, that's what we need to do. Everyone needs to just stop paying it and defund them. They're a disgrace.
Defund the BBC.
Absolutely.
Well, and other mainstream media as well.
Oh yeah, it's not just the BBC, but they're the ones that people have to pay for, and that's the reason why the BBC come in for so much criticism, is because we're actually funding them. Well, I'm not anymore, but we were actually funding them.
They
were irresponsible.
Money. They make their money by bullying pensioners, essentially. There are a lot of older people out there who think that, they've got some special machine that can tell if their TV's turned on.
No, I used to believe that. I used to believe that the van that used to go around with an aerial on the top could actually detect. Wow. There you go. Mad world.
Well, also, there's the viewing figures. What do you think about the viewing figures? Because I think the viewing figures are all essentially made up. Because they do a poll. Because they can't tell how many TVs are on.
No.
So it's all polling.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't really take a lot of notes. I tried to actually see what the viewing figures were for Soccer Saturday were after we left, and for some reason I couldn't find it. It was just, I was like looking, and I just had nowhere that I could access the viewing figures, and I'm thinking, I wonder if they're so bad that they're not letting people have a look at them.
Possibly.
Who knows?
When you left, were there other people who thought the same way as you and who were really critical?
Yeah. I had quite a few messages of support from quite a few people at Sky, but they chose not to speak out because they needed their job to live their life.
So they wanted you to defend their family for them?
Yeah, probably pretty much what it amounts to, yeah. That's fine. I'm okay to be the fall guy. I'm quite happy with that. I got a thick skin. I can take it, and I won't stop.
What percentage, though, is it? Because I think everyone's sort of wondering, within these institutions, within these big corporations...
I had quite a few messages of support from people. So, I mean... it might be like a 50-50 split.
Really? So half of the people know what's going on,
but won't say.
That level of cowardice.
Yeah, but they have to live with their decisions. They make their own decisions. As I said, karma.
Then I started getting onto the vaccine rollout, and there were so many red flags coming out with that kind of stuff. I couldn't shut up. I had to say something. It didn't take much knowledge to know that you can't develop a vaccine in the space of a year and know what its long-term side effects are. It's not possible. So that was my point. I'd kind of obviously gone down a few rabbit holes and read about the whole depopulation ideas and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind, but I didn't really want to put that out there because
you don't want anyone thinking you're a conspiracy theorist, do you?
Little by little. And so I said I pretty much said I'm not going to take the vaccine because I don't know what the long-term side effects are. And also the next red flag was, and people look at me like I'm a nutter when I tell them this, right? But it happened. You might remember, just before the vaccine rollout, they changed the definition of the word vaccine to enable these gene therapies to be called vaccines. Now that for me was like, they're changing the definition of words just to fit their agenda now. And so that was me. I wasn't taking it. My wife wasn't taking it. My daughter wasn't taking it. Not a chance.
So were you surprised that other people were?
I was a little bit surprised. Yeah, but I do think, and I think this is where you kind of got to have a little bit of compassion, a little bit of empathy with people, because the psychological operation that was waged on the British public was on a scale that we have never seen before in this country.
Well, you did have Tony Blair saying that you would be stupid if you didn't take it. So
you take what they say and turn it 180 degrees.
Absolutely.
And that certainly applies when Tony Blair opens his mouth, the war criminal.
Yeah. But people were taking the vaccine and they were lining up and they were. And if you didn't do it, you were...
I was a granny killer.
Absolutely a granny killer.
I was. I got called all sorts of stuff. But the great thing about being a granny killer is you're not really worried about myocarditis.
No, I guess that's very true.
I've never been so healthy in the last 4 years, I've got to be honest. Not taking that shit's the best thing I ever did.
As I'm sure many people here will confirm. So how were you treated? I mean, being in the public eye, being a fit footballer, thrown out of Sky, and now not taking the vaccine on social media, that must have been fun?
Yeah, it was good fun. Yeah. I had people, my own people in my own industry, people who I thought were friends, having a pop at me on social media. But as I said before, I don't get bullied. And if I believe something's right, then I'll stick up for it. So it didn't really matter how many times Gary Lineker tweeted me.
I'm sure you wouldn't eat a packet of Walker's crisps if he asked you now.
Exactly. I mean, I know that when I put my head on the pillow at night, I sleep very, very soundly. Yeah. I'm pretty certain Gary Lineker does not do that.
You come from Guernsey?
Guernsey, yeah.
Were your family in prison during the war? Because we've got family friends who were on Jersey when it was occupied.
My grandfather was forced to work for the Germans when they invaded the island, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he only passed away 3 years ago. So he was 99 when he passed. And I remember having some really interesting conversations with him through his 90s because, I just thought it was too good an opportunity to miss, and get a perspective on it. And strangely enough, he wouldn't have a bad word to say about the Germans on the ground. So the guys that he was working with in the kitchens, so they treated him with respect. They even let him take extra food home for his family. And the actual soldiers themselves, he didn't have a bad word to say about them.
But the higher-ups?
He never met them. But that's where the evil starts.
Yeah, I guess so. When you've got these power structures that people can't resist.
Yep.
Can I ask you about going back to the beautiful game then? Do you think it can be saved by player ownership like they do in some countries and some teams?
Player ownership? Oh, never.
Sorry, not player ownership. Sorry, I meant
fan ownership.
Fan ownership.
Yeah. I think that would be. I think that would be a good idea. I quite like the idea of that. I think in Germany they have a.
I think it's 50-50
they have the model where they get the fans can own 50% or 51%. I think it is.
Because then you've got the investment. You've got the investment because people say, "Oh, I love my team. I love my team."
Absolutely. But we do have to be careful in football that we don't ostracise the fans too much because without fans in the stadium, they won't have a product. I don't know if you ever watched any of the games. When it first restarted and they were playing in front of empty stadiums, it was just nothing.
I saw a couple of bits of it, But I just think
wasn't great.
They're just using the fans essentially as a cash cow.
Yes.
And I think a lot of fans are really dedicated to this sport.
They've
got a lot of wisdom. Okay, obviously in any group you're going to have a few muppets.
Of course.
I think if you've got that real investment in your team, you have people who make interesting decisions and clever decisions, and you could have a discourse.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see actually if one of the lower divisions actually went down that route as a little model to test it. You know, if the Championship or League One or League Two brought in those fan ownership type things, that would be a good experiment to have, I think, to see how that goes.
Do you think it's something that you might get behind? Because you are one of the few people who's awake and sort of challenging the system. And look, I'm not a football fan, but I don't want to see the main sport of this country be completely co-opted.
No, absolutely. I'm the same. So any initiative that kind of brings the game back to its fans, I'd be behind.
Well, maybe we'll see that in the future. Honestly,
fingers crossed.
I would love it if you could get a team and you could get a lot of people behind the team.
Yeah.
And I know usually they're focused in one geographic area, but things have got so nationalised now.
Yeah.
I think you could actually have a team that just stands for certain values, pushes certain values, doesn't take the knee. And
I love the model that in Spain, Athletic Bilbao. I don't know if you know about Athletic Bilbao. They will only have players in their team from the Basque region. So they're only allowed to pick from a specific demographic. And yet they've never been relegated from the Spanish League One.
Because people have loyalty, because it's their region, their area.
And their support is incredible, yeah. They've got a fantastic stadium. I've been to watch a couple of games there at the San Mamés Stadium. It's brilliant. And there's a great model that I think could work around the world.
That sounds amazing. For new people coming up, though, is it worth getting into football? Because back in the day, you had a chance of getting in if you were quite good. But now
it's
it
difficult
seems to me like nearly every boy wants to be a footballer. So it's almost like an impossible dream, and they put everything into it. And you make nothing, or you make everything.
Yes.
And it's not even the 1%. Okay, it's not even good to be the best in your school, your college. You have to be the creme de la creme to actually make this money.
And the problem is with the money that the clubs have got, they go out and want to buy instant success. So they go out and will think nothing of spending 30 or 40, 50 million quid on a player. When if they just actually nurtured the talent that they had there, they could save that money and bring those young players through. And I think football clubs waste so much money. It's unbelievable.
So do you think it's worth it? Or do you think it's maybe worth it? Because I know you're sporty in a lot of sports. Going into a sport where there's a bit more room for you to actually succeed and develop your skill, even if there's less money at the end of it, you've got more of a chance.
Yeah, possibly. I think you have to weigh up that decision when you kind of get to 14, 15, 16, that kind of age. But the lure of being a professional footballer and everything that brings with it nowadays is pretty tempting. I mean, it's hard for a kid to give up on that dream.
Is it really that good? I've seen people who've got a bit of fame, and it just doesn't seem to really bring as many benefits as people think.
Yeah, I mean, the football for me wasn't about the fame. The football for me was all about entertaining people. So I didn't really contemplate the fame side of things when I went into football. It didn't even cross my mind. I didn't spend money on flash cars. It was just all about the football for me. And if a kid's got that attitude, then fair play to him. And I think that's the way you get through, is to focus on your football and don't focus on the rewards.
And bringing joy to people. I think
Absolutely.
that's a really good ethic.
Yep.
So for anyone who's still dedicated to football, what is your advice to a young footballer starting out who might be a bit more critically minded going into the industry? What are your tips for learning to play football and how to survive in the industry? I know it's changed.
It's a good question. Yeah, it has changed quite a lot. It's a lot more professional for a start from when I rocked up. There's so many more staff. There's so many more of your needs catered for by staff. But basics for me, any young footballer who wants a career in the game, I think the first thing they need to do, which a lot of players still don't do to this day, is learn to kick with your bad foot. Because you might have a wand of a right foot, but if you can't kick with your left foot, your opponents soon work that out, and they can make it very awkward for you on a football pitch if you can only kick with one foot. So you open up so many more channels, so many more options if you're comfortable kicking the ball with your weak foot. So my first bit of advice always would be work on your bad foot.
Cool. So I know you've not got much time. So do you want to let people know where they can find you? Talk about your podcast that you do.
Sure. No, I'm not doing the podcast on Getter anymore, but I'm on X. Matlatis7 is where you can find me on there, where I upset all the right kind of people. And I've got my own website, which is mlt7.com. If you want to get in touch with me, there's an email address on there that if you need to book me for anything, you can get in touch with me through that. And that's where I am. I'm a pretty simple guy.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And game of five-a-side?
I'm 55, you know.
Well, I can't kick a ball with either foot, so I'm handicapped.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to interview the one and only Matt Le Tissier, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for turning out, everyone.
Keep doing what you're doing.
You too, Richard. Well done, mate.
Thanks for watching. Please give us a like, a share, a subscribe, hit the notification button if you would like to help. We've got a Patreon and a Subscribe Star, so please head on over there and pledge us some support if you want to keep this journalism going. We've got a professional studio here and we could do with your support to keep these great conversations coming.